What happens when a judge sentences a young black man to 15 years, only to realize minutes later that he's looking into the eyes of his own forgotten son? What follows leaves the courtroom, and the judge himself completely shaken. You ever had one of those days where you try to do the right thing, the honest thing, and the world turns right around and spits in your face like you should have known better? That was my Tuesday. It started with a bag of groceries and an old woman with a limp. Miss Florence, 86 years old, wore the same wide-brimmed pink hat every Sunday whether it was raining or not. Lived 3 doors down in apartment 3B, sweetest lady on the block. Raised half the kids in the building just by handing out peppermints and life advice. So when I saw her struggling with that step outside the bodega, I did what any decent man raised on dignity and grits would do. "Let me help you with that, Miss Florence," I said, taking her hand like she was the Queen of Harlem. "Oh, bless you, baby," she smiled, and we shuffled our way inside like it was some grand slow-motion dance. I paid for her groceries, not because I'm made of money. God knows my paycheck looks like somebody's mistake, but because she was short and proud, and pride don't feed a person. Bread, milk, her blood pressure pills, and that overpriced cherry jam she loves. She gave me that look. You know the one, like you just saved the whole block with a smile and a $20 bill. And then it happened. Soon as I stepped out the door, I mean not even a full minute passed, a black and white cruiser screeched up like they were chasing a ghost. 2 officers jumped out like it was a hostage situation, hand on holster, eyes wild. "You! Hands where we can see 'em!" one of them barked. I froze, groceries still in hand, jam still warm. "You fit the description," the taller one said, like that explained everything. "Suspect in an armed robbery down on 8th. "Oh, so now every black man with a decent haircut and a hoodie is a suspect?" I asked. Sarcasm might not save your life, but it sure makes the ride to jail a little less humiliating. They didn't laugh. Next thing I knew, I was face first on the concrete, my hands zip-tied so tight I couldn't feel my fingertips. Miss Florence was screaming, "What are you doing? That boy just helped me. He didn't rob nobody." They didn't even blink. She could have been reading poetry for all they cared. They tossed me in the back like old furniture, slammed the door. No questions, no rights read, just like that, in broad daylight, for shopping and being black on a Tuesday. Back at the precinct, they told me my prints matched some evidence from the robbery, even though I hadn't been anywhere near 8th Street in weeks. I'd spent the whole afternoon cleaning out my mom's storage unit and helping Miss Florence. But none of that mattered. Not to them. Not to the system. My court-appointed lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Eyes on the clock, not on me. He had one job: shuffle me through the machine and keep things quiet. "You're facing 15, he said, like he was ordering lunch. "If you plead guilty, we can probably get it down to 5. 5 years? For something I didn't do?" He shrugged. "You'd be surprised how often the innocent end up doing time just to make it go away." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about guilt or innocence. This was about closing a file, clearing a desk, moving along. It was a machine, and I was just another gear stuck in the teeth. I spent that night in a holding cell, trying to make sense of how fast my life had flipped. From helping an old woman with groceries, to eating a bologna sandwich on a metal bench under a flickering light, waiting to be called a criminal by a man in a robe who didn't know me, and probably didn't care to, but I didn't know yet how personal it was about to get. What happened next changed everything. You do not want to miss how this story unfolds. I walked into that courtroom looking like a man, but they were already treating me like a number. The moment those doors swung open and the guard said, "Defendant, step forward," I swear, every neck in the room turned like they were watching a zoo exhibit. And me? I wasn't shackled, but the weight was all there. The silence, the stares, the unspoken judgment. They sat me down like I was already guilty. And maybe to them, I was. Not because of the facts, not because of the evidence, but because I matched a description they didn't even bother to double-check. Let me tell you something. In that room, reasonable doubt was nowhere to be found. But certainty based on skin tone? That sat right there in the front row, grinning. Now, picture this. A judge walks in. Old white man, silver hair, posture like a brick wall. He didn't smile, didn't blink. Just sat there like his chair came with a built-in crown. His name? Honorable Judge Raymond H. Hartwell. Sounded like he came out the womb with a gavel in his hand. He looked at me once, cold, clinical, like he was reading a chart at a hospital and not seeing an actual person sitting across from him. "State versus Jaden Rivers," he said, like I was a case file, not a son, not a neighbor, not a man who buys groceries for grandmas. The prosecution stepped up and did their little performance. Fingerprints this, eyewitness that, hoodie, hoodie, hoodie. I swear, if I hear the word hoodie one more time, I might just start a bonfire with every sweatshirt I own. And then came the star witness, a jittery pharmacist who barely looked up from his notes. "Are you certain this is the man?" the prosecutor asked. He hesitated, then glanced at me, then back at the prosecutor and said, "Well, he could be." Could be? That's all it took? Could be was enough to toss me into a cell for a decade. And my lawyer, bless his soul, he stood up like he was being forced to audition for a role he didn't want. "Your Honor, my client has an alibi." The judge cut him off. "Is that so? Where is this alibi?" He motioned toward a printed statement from Miss Florence. "A handwritten note from an elderly neighbor?" The judge actually sighed, like he was tired of hearing the truth. My lawyer sat down. I don't even think his chair made it all the way to the floor before the judge was ready to wrap things up. Then it was my turn. They told me I could speak. Big of them, right? I stood up and faced that room like a man on the edge. My palms were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Y'all can pretend this is justice if you want, but I know what this is. I'm not here because you found truth. I'm here because it's easier to blame me than admit you rushed this case. I paused. And one more thing, I didn't do it. And deep down, you know I didn't. Judge Hartwell blinked once, then looked down at his notes. I saw something in his eyes, something small, a twitch. Confusion? Recognition? I couldn't tell, but it vanished just as fast. The next thing I heard was, 15 years, no parole. Bang. And just like that, the floor fell out from under me. They grabbed my arms, but I didn't resist. What was the point? As they led me out, I turned my head one last time. Judge Hartwell was still sitting there, looking straight at me now. But this time, his face wasn't stone. It was pale, like he saw a ghost. Or maybe he saw something he wasn't ready to admit. This is the moment. Everything you've been waiting for is right around the corner. Stay right here, because what happens next will flip the whole thing upside down. 3 days. That's how long I sat in that holding cell after the sentence. 3 days of concrete, fluorescent buzz and the kind of silence that screams in your ear when the lights go out. Let me be clear. The pain ain't just in the bars or the bed that feels like it's made of bricks. It's in the knowing. Knowing the truth couldn't save you. Knowing your skin spoke louder than your voice. Knowing you stood up like a man and still got crushed like a mistake no one wanted to fix. But back in that courtroom, someone wasn't sleeping either. Judge Hartwell. They said he hadn't shown up to the bench since the ruling. Called in ill, but folks talk. Bailiffs whisper, clerks murmur, and the rumor? That the judge had locked himself in chambers after the trial, rereading the file. Over and over and over. And then he pulled a file that hadn't been opened in 20 years. Let me rewind you for a second. When I was a kid, I used to ask my mama about my father. She'd pause, smile a little, and say, "He had a good heart, baby, but his world and ours didn't match." I never saw a photo, never had a name, just a tightness in her throat whenever the subject came up. Eventually, I stopped asking. Turns out, the man with the robe and the hammer, that was my father. And he didn't recognize his own blood until the last 5 minutes of the trial. Until the name on the file, Jaden Elijah Rivers, matched the middle name he once picked in a hospital hallway 2 decades ago. That realization hit him too late. And instead of stopping the train, he just let it crash. Why? Ego, fear, shock. You ever see a man try to outrun himself? That was Judge Hartwell, standing at the edge of the biggest mistake of his life, and still gripping the gavel like it would save him from drowning. But justice has a strange sense of timing. Because while I sat staring at 4 walls, Miss Florence was writing letters. And when that didn't work, she marched down to the local community board meeting with receipts, security footage from the bodega, a time-stamped grocery receipt, a neighbor's statement, and that cherry jam, still unopened, with a label date matching the minute the robbery supposedly happened. It spread like fire. A local reporter caught wind, then a civil rights group, then a new public defender, the real kind, the ones that look you in the eye and listen. Meanwhile, Judge Hartwell walked into the district attorney's office without his robe, without his title, just a file folder in his hand and a storm behind his eyes. He told them the truth, all of it, who I was, who he was, what he did, and what he didn't do. The DA had no choice but to reopen the case. And when I walked back into that courtroom, still in cuffs, still wearing the same beige jumpsuit, I felt something different. Not justice. Not yet. But attention. They were finally looking at me like a man, not a case number. The judge this time was someone new. Fresh on the bench. Female. Stern but fair. She overturned the conviction within 20 minutes. When I stepped outside, the sun felt fake. Like I was walking in someone else's dream. But there he was. Hartwell. Waiting by the steps. No robe, no entourage. Just him. Holding that same photo my mother used to keep in her Bible. He walked up slow. "Jaden, I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. "You sentenced me before you even saw me. Now you want redemption?" He nodded. No excuses, no speech. Just a man holding guilt. "You don't get redemption," I said, "but you can get to work. Start using that name to fix what you helped break." He looked down, and for the first time, listened. He didn't say another word, just stood there, watching me walk past him. Free, tall, unapologetic. I left that courthouse not just with my name cleared, but with every ounce of my pride exactly where it belonged. On my own 2 feet. Some stories ain't meant to make you comfortable. They're meant to make you look again. Because sometimes the one wearing the robe is the one who needs to be judged.